Welcome to session 3 of Engaging End Users for Automation Project Success. My name is Beth Myers. I am a former Decisions employee. I worked for Decisions for about 2 years on the sales team about 2 years ago. And my background is that I spent 20 years of healthcare and IT experience. My current job is that I work at the University of Minnesota as a professor at the University of Minnesota. And I'm doing some consulting for Decisions on the side for the marketing team. So I'll share a little bit about what I've learned with my recent consulting with Decisions, a little bit about what I learned about getting a PhD during consulting, and maybe at the end, if we have time, a little story about what I do for fun on the side, which is e-foiling electric surfboard riding, which is so much more fun than anything we're going to talk about today. But not why I'm here, so let's dive in and talk a little bit about end users and why you should chat with them. Before we jump in, because I work at the University of Minnesota, I just want to make sure you all know that this isn't part of my regular duties and everything. I'm doing this in an individual capacity here today, not as part of the U of M. So before we get into the agenda, a quick quiz. What do these three have in common? 4 things. Anyone know off the top of their head? Anyone know who that guy is on the right side? I'll give you a hint. It is not Gordon Jones. He is a chef. Good cook. Something restaurant. It's all restaurant related. Very good. Yeah. Yeah. Nice. I'm glad that you knew that. I'm impressed that you knew that was the Michelin star, because I didn't until I Googled it. I'm like, it looks like a flower. I'm like, okay, I guess it's Michelin star. So the one on the right is not from Food Network. It's on Netflix, though. It's the Great British Bake Off. And that is Paul Hollywood, who gives out a Hollywood handshake if the contestants do an excellent job when they make their meal. And so I'm going to tell you a story about him in a second. So these are all ways to rate excellent food, right? It is a Yelp review, Michelin star, Clean Plate Club, if you know that, or Paul Hollywood. So the Michelin star, they have a very formal way of rating good food, right? Their program measures the quality of the ingredients, the harmony of the flavors, the mastery of techniques, the personality of the chef, and consistency across that menu over time. So there's a very formal way of saying, here's excellent food or an excellent restaurant. So I'd like you to think about what makes a great decisions developer. I surveyed some of my friends, so you guys don't have to answer, and they said, well, they can build quickly and quality without errors. Some people think maybe if you can incorporate the latest tech. So are you going to win the Chat GTP contest this afternoon and incorporate the latest technology or the latest ways of building? Solve complex problems, wear cool Decisions t-shirts, like those are all ways. I'm like, yeah, maybe all of those. But what I'm here to talk about today and to try to sell you on is that really, when we think about good development and decisions or otherwise, should be all about the end users. You want to build products that resonate with end users. Why? It's not actually about the end users, it's about you, which is great, because it's easy to do things that are about me. Well, for me anyway. It's about you, because if you build something for the end users, the end user is wowed by the software that you created. They are going to recommend you to build things in the future. You're going to add things onto your resume, and it's a good way for you to be able to grow your portfolio. This maxim is true that you should be focused on those end users, whether you're a citizen developer, you're an end user yourself building something for your small team, or you are a senior architect designing a full-blown application on the Decisions platform. If you'd like to learn more about empowering citizen development, quick plug for the presentation by Mark Savage and team at 2:45 today in Salon C. I want to make sure that if you're interested in that, that's one of the reasons I joined Decisions, is to empower people like me, citizen developers, to be able to do things, and why I continue to support Decisions. But a little bit outside of our scope today. So if we want to think about how to how to score development, let's consult the experts about the way to achieve those high scores from their users. The people who study human system interaction are called human factors engineers. And in the book called Designing for People, they describe 3 main aims of human factors engineering: safety, productivity, and satisfaction. So most of the apps that we build in our customers and decisions focus more on satisfaction, which is user satisfaction. We'll talk about more today. A good chunk of them deal with performance. Why do we want to build a new app or solution? Because we can build it quickly and we can increase productivity because we've got a technology solution. Safety is something that's a high concern for some of our manufacturing customers. We have customers who leverage decisions to build medical device products, customers who use it to build our aviation products and even warfare products. So interesting. Some of those things have very high need for safety. So those are the 3 things that you should think about each time you start your product. Think, how am I going to get my 5-star review for this solution that I'm building? Which of these 3 are the most important for my customers that I should keep in mind in the background while I'm building this app? I want to make sure my overall goal for the project is to make sure that I'm providing good performance. Or they really have these crabby people who've been using the old tech and they want a new tech, so satisfaction's their priority. Or they're designing something that is very crucial to patient safety in some area, like automated car decisioning or AI, that you need to make sure you get safety right. So good thing to consider at the very beginning. So let me tell you about how I found out about the Hollywood handshake. I wasn't familiar with watching the baking show, even though I watch a lot of Food Network too, until I found out about it from one of our potential customers. So Bracy Parr, who's now on the sales team, and I wrote a POC, and we did a POC using an ingredient list. We thought, okay, we have 75 people who work at a large bank who are all listening to this POC demonstration. How do we tell them about decisions without going too nerdy for all of this entire team that's going to use it to replace something like their SharePoint implementation? So we thought, we'll use it as an ingredient list. And so we chunked down the different functions of decisions as different ingredients, and then we labeled it that way and we presented it, and afterwards our champion lead there sent me this picture and said, I'm giving you the Hollywood handshake because that was the best POC delivery we've ever had. I'm like, that's awesome. I don't know what that is, but it seems really cool. And now I've watched every episode of Bake Off, including Junior Bake Off and all the other spinoffs. It's a really great show. They're so nice to each other even though they vote them off the island, so. Or out of the tent in this scenario. So what did Bracy or I do? Our handshake, our award here, is from our customer. It's not from Carl and Heath or our bosses, the founders of decisions. Our handshake is from our customers. And we didn't do anything special or magical to be able to get that handshake. Instead, we listened to what our customers asked for. Pretty simple. We do that on every single sales call and at the beginning of our professional services engagements. We asked questions, we repeated back what we heard for clarity. Again, basic one-on-one of communication. Then we built the solution they needed. Not exactly what they asked for, because we know what the benefits of decisions are and how decisions can help meet their needs, which is a little different than what they were asking for, which was a direct one-to-one replacement for their legacy system. And then we previewed our deliverable with some of the key stakeholders to make sure that they were engaged throughout the process. And the last step we did was presenting those deliverables in the context that those users could understand, where we use that ingredients list, and Decisions has all the ingredients you need for a successful project. It would help them, all 75 disparate people who are all voting on whether they would want to buy Decisions or not, really understand what our offering was. So even though these steps seem really intuitive, and I was embarrassed when I was writing them down on the slide, like people would be like, yeah, I paid for this, or not paid for this, either way. It's harder than you think to get some of these right. And it's because of the way that experts think and learn. And that is one of my passion points. So we're going to talk about that as our first agenda item today of understanding the expertise and tacit knowledge. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the human factors principles that can help us through this beyond just that safety performance that we talked about already. And then how we can use decisions to co-create and engage those customers through the end users throughout the build cycle and wrap things up. So the first part, again, my favorite, I was speaking about this knowledge with a developer yesterday, and I was speaking about it with him in my day-to-day job of a professor. He said, wow, it must be really hard to be a professor because you have this song in your head, a way of thinking about things, and you have to communicate it to the students and then check to see if they understand that. And I said, this is so funny that you're describing it to me that way because I'm talking about this tomorrow, so last night at cocktail hour. And I said, and actually it's not that hard as a professor because I just give them a test to see if they know my song in my head, and then I give them an F if they don't understand. So it's easy, not hard at all, compared to trying to do it in this context where they're users with this tacit knowledge in their head. So tacit knowledge is all the things that an individual knows. It's a deep intuition, deep in their gut, and it's so hard for them to express it to others because of the way they've learned it. For me, my personal example is all of the things that, all the little things that I like. So my husband has given up on all those little things because they're so deep that I can't describe what I want for Christmas or Valentine's Day, and I keep changing my mind enough that I don't get presents at all anymore. It takes a lot to be able to go peel back all those layers to understand what that tacit knowledge really is. On the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about how people develop that. But first, I'm interested to know, any of you guys cookers? Anyone fry eggs? Anyone can make the perfect egg? Yes, Mr. Food Channel. Not perfect.
Not perfect, no. But I got pretty good at it when I was taking care of some of the friends in college.
Ah.
Forever for a friend group, so whenever I was taking care of them the next morning,
Eh.
eggs were apparently their go-to hangover breakfast, so I got pretty good.
Lots of practice then, right?
Practice makes perfect.
Did they all like the eggs the same way?
No, they did not.
Yeah.
Half of them liked them fried sunny side up. The other half, 1/4 liked them over medium, and the other quarter liked them scrambled.
Okay.
And a little scrambled.
Yeah.
So I had to cook them 3 different ways, and sometimes I still mixed up the different plates.
Yeah.
But thankfully they were all hungover, so they all made it nice.
Exactly. That's great. So not too picky at the end. Yeah. And that sounds like you're a great friend. So. Fun. Well, like you, I did a little searching for how to make the perfect egg, and even the foodchannel.com couldn't give me one recipe. There was like 10 recipes, and each recipe had variability in the recipe, and then it had variability within the variability where they said, like, cook it for about 1 minute. So if you think about a chef has their expertise because they've gained this from doing something over and over and over and getting feedback from those end users. And those are the conditions to build expertise. There are 2 main conditions. The first thing is adequate practice, doing it over and over. Some of you may have heard about the 10,000 hour rule of practicing something 10,000 times or 10,000 hours works. That actually came from one study of cellists. So if you'd like to be an expert in playing the cello, 10,000 hours is your goal. For anything else, it varies depending on what you're practicing. Yeah, you can't say magic 10,000 hours for anything. Even though they made it to a country song, that makes me sad. The other condition is that you have to have valid, timely feedback. So frying an egg is great because you know right away if you're eating it yourself whether you did a good job or not, especially if you're trying to keep that yolk intact and you break it. So valid feedback there. If you're giving it to someone else to eat, you're also getting valid, timely feedback. So you can remember, oh, I cooked it this way, and here's the feedback. It's valid. example of non-valid feedback is when you get in a wicked feedback cycle, you get feedback that you think you're doing a good job, but you're really not. I don't know the doctor's name, but there was a doctor out there 100 years ago who was, thought he was the best at predicting when someone got sick. Well, he was the best because he was predicting by every person whose tongue he palpated would get sick, because he would start with the sickest ones and then give those same germs to every single patient. So he had adequate practice, but he was getting timely feedback. Yeah, the patients got sick within a couple days, but it wasn't valid feedback that his actions were actually were causing the cure or predict. Yeah, wicked feedback cycles are out there. The other part about timely feedback, there are some things you just can't become an expert in and are with it as a human, because you can't, the feedback cycle is too long. So even sometimes with a surgical patient, if you had surgery and you don't get better from that surgery for 9 months, we did some studies with ICU patients, and the nurses and doctors actually had a hard time diagnosing what that patient was going to happen with that patient long term, because they don't know what happens. They only know what happens to them during the hospital stay. Very interesting part of expertise. So this is one of the areas that I like the best. That's why I'm talking about it for a couple more minutes before we get all the way back into this end users. Your end users are experts. And I want to talk just one more minute about how this came to be. The reference on the bottom is for Daniel Kahneman, who is a Nobel award winner for this research, and his research was that people have biases. They have biases, and they are not rational decision makers. They don't follow your decision matrix every single time. They go with their gut feel, their tacit knowledge. And he said they're wrong because they do that, and it's hard for us to build economic models. On the other hand, Gary Klein studied firefighters, and he said, yeah, some of these firefighters, though, they're right. They're right. The chief said, we need to get out of this building now. And get out now. They got out. 20 seconds later, the whole thing collapsed. And he couldn't describe why he knew that. He thought it was a sixth sense, right? And Gary Klein and his team investigated all of these people who thought they had sixth sense, and they found out that it was areas that had adequate practice and valid timely feedback. And the way that they think about things is, instead of building a decision matrix or a decision model the way that we do in decisions, they use pattern matching, where they have a situation and they think, have I had this same situation before? And they said, okay, based off of that, I'm matching the situation. What action should I choose? Is that gonna give me a good outcome or a bad outcome? And then they go with it. They're going with the first solution that comes to mind that comes up with a good outcome. Very different. So if you're asking that person, well, what are all the criteria that we need and what are the steps we need to build in this workflow? They're gonna have a hard time answering you because they don't know. They really don't know. All they know is that they've seen a fire like this before, and it took these engineers, human factors experts, to interview them and do observation with them and spend months with them in the field till they realized, oh, the building was burning hotter than usual. It reminded him of another place that had collapsed. All of these little criteria that they couldn't describe on their own. They thought it was a magical sixth sense that they knew. But drive it down to that. So that's one thing I'd like you to take away from this, as some empathy for the end users who have this knowledge and are not used to describing it in the way that we're asking them to in order to build something in decisions. The other part is that they might not know how to build in decisions and even think in workflow. So you've got super experts, great smart people, then you have people who just don't think that way. My initial title for this slide was people who don't think like us. Because I am currently teaching students at the U of M. I can't show you their student workflows, but I assigned 71 students to make workflows this semester. Simple BPM workflow, had 3 decision points. And I would say 10% of those students couldn't do it. I coached a couple of them. They had 3 iterations. Somebody had a hexagon in there. I'm like, no hexagon. It's just, there's 3 shapes you should be using. They had lines that crossed back and forth. They didn't know where the decision points were. So there's a group of users out there that may not ever make a good citizen developer. They may not make even someone, but they know their job. They know how to do their job, but they can't even give you a list of the important things that go into there. So I just want you to think about, you have people in this area who just can't describe what they do, and people on the right side. I tried to find an example online of a diagram as bad as the one my students gave me. I couldn't find one. This is the worst that I could find, but I'll have to make my own for the next time I go through a presentation like this. Anyway, let's see. Last point I'd like to make is just back on this slide. This is the same type of process when we're talking about AI, that AI learns to use. If you need to think that has to have, an AI algorithm has to have adequate practice and valid, timely feedback. One of the reasons that they open ChatGPT, open to the whole public, is so we can go in there and say, yes, thumbs up answer, no, thumbs down answer. And I do that every single time, and then I get better access, I think, than other people sometimes. But this is the same way that computer algorithms learn, and people are working to see if they can do some more of the situational, make them smarter by doing some more of that situational matching, but we're not really quite there yet. So the summary of this section is that I'd like you to think, keep in mind that empathy for the end users, and for those end users, the tips to success are just employ active listening, ask questions to clarify, and summarize to check your understanding. At this basic level, Terry Weatherstone and team are giving a presentation tomorrow, so if you'd like to have some more information about how to document basic requirements, Terry's got a couple good tips for you tomorrow during his session. So next, after you've uncovered what they want, what do they really need? So I entered the field of IT back in 2000s because people were automating everything exactly how it was. Money was pouring into healthcare, and they were taking all of the paper processes, and instead of documenting in 5 different places on paper, now I had to document the patient information 5 different places in the EHR. It was a nightmare. They also pulled nurses off the floor from patient care and stuck them in a literal broom closet to put all the final touches on the software before it was developed. I could rant all day about implementations and automating paper forms, but instead we're going to talk about how to do it better, and the better way to do it is to adopt something else from human factors, which is the human factors design cycle. This isn't net new. This is the same as the scientific method or other things that you've heard for any other design cycle, but this is just gives you steps to think about when to include the end users. Either before, during, or after in the understanding, creating, or evaluation phases of your software build. Why do we want to do this? Because context matters. So this pizza works just fine when it's in the old system, the legacy system that comes with a table and it's all cleaned up and it's got a nice roaring fire. The pizza, their process that they're telling you might not work so well if you haven't built all the context around it. You need to understand this context in order to help customers really be successful using whatever your new solution is by understanding everything that goes around what they're asking you for with their old solution. So let's talk about context of our customers' uses and decisions. I mentioned before that I've been doing some work with the marketing team, and as part of that, I just completed analysis of all of our more than 200 customers at Decisions with their use cases that are been documented, which are, I think we have more than 900 individual use cases. And it was super interesting. I love it. I get to share more information with the Decisions team shortly about some of the things I found out of that. But for today, we're going to talk about it in this 2x2 format, where we have some customers using Decisions to do really simple things, like just manage a single API. Or in the top one, build a simple form, like we have a college who is using Decisions to build a permission slip to go on a camping trip. Pretty simple form. On the other end of build complexity, we have customers who are leveraging Decisions platform to build a full application that then they use and sell subscriptions to their customers, or process thousands of transactions a day. Or on the red box here, manage all of their data, be the central hub to keep all their data clean between their other big systems. So build complexity, easy on the left, much more complex on the right. User interaction, top to bottom. Sometimes the users aren't interacting with Decisions at all. it's messing with their processes, but you're not actually interacting with decisions. They're using it as a headless implementation. And then user interaction on the top. Simple form means a user's actually interacting with that simple form, that permission slip form, or a full application, built-in decisions. So there's we're gonna walk through next how to engage each of those. So on the left side of that 2x2 with low build complexity, on the bottom, if we're building something as simple as an API, you need to understand the use case up front. So that very first part, you still need to understand why are you building this API? Why do those two things need to connect to each other so you can build it the right way? Really, that's about it. Once you understand that, you can test the API yourself, you can build the API, and you certainly don't have to have someone look over your shoulder at this user to make sure that you've done it right. They don't need to know how the sausage is made. On the top, if you're building a really simple form, even though I just said how much I hate automating forms exactly how they are, if it's a camping trip permission slip, just do it. Now, in this case, make sure you understand the customer's needs up front, and afterwards, make sure that you've give them a chance to evaluate it and meets all their needs at the end. But again, they don't need to watch you build it or be co-developed, and those can be pretty light on either side. Now, when we get to the more complex use cases, on the bottom part here, if you have high complexity and low user interface, like developing a master data management system, I recommend that you go to the level of those human factors engineering types. So not just business analysis, gathering requirements. You need to understand why data needs to go from one place to another, understand the system and the context of where that data came from, and then how much of that context needs to follow the data along in order for the data to make sense in the future areas. And then do testing both up front to understand that why from the experts who have a hard time telling you the why, and at the end where to make sure that the data still maintains all of its usability after you've done that transformation. Now the middle again, that's where the sausage is made and it doesn't have a UX. They don't need to get involved, the users, about exactly how you're building the connections back and forth and what your flows look like. Not important for them. On the top part, that bucket number 3, of building full applications, that's the time where we need to involve those users all the way through in co-creation. So they're involved in every single step. And we'll go through some examples of that. So the first part again is understanding. This is applicable to all 4 of those quadrants. And a couple of examples we're gonna go through today are task analysis and process mining. The first one is task analysis. So if you're a human factors engineer formally trained in this process, you read books or refer to books like Working Minds or Task Analysis or this Designing for People book, and you really enjoy meeting with small groups of people, doing brainstorming sessions with them, doing complex queries and open-ended sessions to make sure you really understand what they want. You can't just ask them for their requirements, you have to dig. And that's what this type of person is trained to do, that human factors person. I used this technique when I was working on my dissertation work. I asked those experts for their recent experience and a super challenging experience. So instead of asking them to just describe the problem to me, I want them to describe yesterday's problem. So it's fresh in their mind, they can give me a better listing of all the different steps that are take, everything they consider. You can also follow them around and do direct observation, and it's another type of task analysis, and these books have lots of options if you'd like to learn or practice these on your own. An alternative method to do this is to do something like adopt decisions process mining. Decisions process mining gives you a chance to look at all of the current practice instead of just the current practice that's reported by a couple of subject matter experts like you would do in task analysis. You can pull in all of the data that has been collected from a legacy system over all of history or whatever period of time is relevant and map all that data so you can analyze the variance in an unbiased way. If you're interested in learning more about process mining, Mark Klein and Raf Conforti have a demo tomorrow at 10:30, 11:15, or 1 o'clock in Salon C. They'll be there all day. And it's interesting because it lets you understand the true steps that are taken, not just what's documented in the standard operating procedure. And when you're building, then you can try to eliminate that variation by incorporating things like options into your application, and know what you're going to expect with that level of variation in your end product, and use it for end testing as well. Okay, so if you're building a complex app, you also need to include those end users in the process, the whole process. And the bonus with that, and this creation process, we're here in the design cycle and we're talking about decisions. And decisions is the best tool for engaging users in that design process. Let me tell you an example of this. Another one of our fine decisions employees who's a developer went with me out to a customer who was newly implementing decisions. They had 14 development teams, and those 14 development teams used traditional coding and did 8-week sprint cycles to build out their products. And they had a business analyst team. Their business analyst sat down with their customers and designed the perfect end solution in a big Visio diagram that they printed off on multiple sheets of paper and taped up on the wall. And then the developers would break that down into different tasks and then create that task and hard code the logic. The problem with that is that it took a long time. It took 8 weeks to build those sprint cycles, and if the business analyst didn't have it perfectly, then it would get coded the wrong way. And if it got coded the wrong way, then the users would say, oh yeah, I messed that up in the initial thing. They would have to start again all the way to creating new requirements, go in as a ticket to get that logic changed. When they used decisions for this instead, we sat down with that same business analyst with her great big spreadsheets, and we built out in decisions all the logic that they were going to build out in 8 weeks in 2 days. It went so well that they decided they were going to use decisions and introduce it as a tool across all 14 of their development teams, and as a way to really short cycle the coding of all that logic. We also found those errors right there at the table because we were able to do testing and unit testing in decisions while the build was being made, which is something that we wouldn't have found out till later when the customer's like, that's not what I meant when I said that. So helps clarify that part as well. So we're lucky that we have decisions and we can co-create using those no-code workflows that is easy for, I would say, 90% of the population to be able to follow of your end users. Before we go on, again, though, you may be thinking, gosh, it seems as a developer, why do I really want to incorporate those end users? Sure, they'll give me 5 stars, but I don't really care that much, do I? Well, I asked my husband about that because he builds little apps for people, and he said, well, it is worth it because today, I have to answer all of their questions and they bug me all the time. So I'm building them a little self-service app so they stop bugging me. And if I build it right, they will stop bugging me and they can take care of this themselves. So just in case you need another reason why you should incorporate those end user feedback. You got the positive, they could give you rave reviews. You also have the positive for you that they will stop bugging you because you built it right the first time for them. Okay, onto that last part of the human factors design, which that usability cycle is the evaluation. This, again, can be an entire college course on formal usability testing where we can do heuristic evaluations, system evaluation. There are books and books on this. Here's a couple of examples. And this is where you want to go back to those 3 initial goals of satisfaction, performance, or safety, and think, did we accomplish those goals for this particular build? And how do you want to test that? Satisfaction, you can test it through a simple questionnaire if you'd like to. You can do something very scientific, like count how many clicks it takes for them to get something, or the time before and after to measure performance. And you can even do things like do an eye movement study to see what they're looking at on the screen, see if it meets their needs. So very interesting, lots of ways to be able to test usability at the end, and then go back through the cycle again, redesign and improve if you need to. Wrapping things up quick before our break. I want to talk a little bit about one of my favorite apps that I think has great usability, and we're far enough away from lunch and you're going for a break, so I can talk about food again, yeah. The Domino's Pizza app, not the whole thing, especially not the part where it says, do you want to buy lava cakes on the end? I'm like, no, don't, no. Or cinnamon twists, nummy, but no. This pizza builder page in particular is one of my favorites from the user perspective. It helps me with performance. I know that I'm getting exactly what I'm getting, so my quality's increased. It has all the options available for me as an end user to tweak things how I want. I can see almost all my options on the same screen. I can see a picture of what my pizza looks like. We've been using this in the usability area as an example for, I don't know, maybe almost 10 years now when they first came out with their app, and I thought, I'm gonna do a little search to find out. There must be some awards. So I found the awards, but I also have a cautionary tale. They didn't do their usability testing for all of their users, so Domino's also got sued because they didn't make this ADA compliant when they were building their application. So got a little bit of a good example with a cautionary tale at the same time. Let me wrap things up for you so you can get out there and do a little networking with your friends before the next session. In order to get that handshake from your customers, I recommend you do the same kind of basic steps that Bracy and I did when we did our POC, except for you're doing them instead of us. With that design cycle in mind and which parts you're going to do for each different type of customer or build that you're doing, you can listen to your end users and listen to what they're asking for, repeat back and ask them questions to make sure that you really understand what the requirements are. Build the solution that they need, not always exactly what they're asking for. Keep them involved throughout the process so you can get feedback during the build cycle. And then finally, you can present those deliverables in the context that the users will understand in order for them to have buy-in. Any questions for me as we wrap things up? Yes.
Just a kind of off-topic question to an extent. Going back to your allegory of the firefighter's tales, would you say that experimentation and research into the human brain as an AI and a learning system and a computer would possibly expedite our own research and development of computers and AIs as a whole and learning systems as a whole for actual machine learning and automation, since throughout history, the human brain has been seen to be the best computer and automation system through just basic motor function and muscle memory?
Yes, that is a good question, and I can actually answer it, not because I've studied a lot in school, but really quick answering. There's a book out there called Rebooting AI, and that book is actually addressing some of that question. You can also take a cognitive science course, which I don't recommend. It's horrible with reading. Every person who's thought about looking at the human brain and understanding it and AI for the last, well, primarily about 100 years or 70 years. People have been trying to understand how the human brain thinks about things so they can try to train AI and use those algorithms the same way. And Rebooting AI is a recent book that talks about how we've trained algorithms up to date today and how we need to train them more like the human brain if we want to increase their capacity. Good question. Yeah. I'm about halfway through, so I can't give it stars yet, but we'll see. Yeah. Any other questions? Thanks so much for your time today.